How you guys doing? Happy to take your questions.
Yeah, guys, it sounded like Bo Nix was your guy for quite a while. Tell us why.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, obviously it's a long process. It's a year-long process for all, for the draft, for the quarterbacks, for all the positions. And so it was really important for us to go through the whole process with all these quarterbacks. We liked all the quarterbacks. And, with Bo, we spent a lot of time, started at the Senior Bowl Combine, private. We did a private out there in Oregon. And Sean really probably wasn't familiar with Bo early in the process, and then started watching tape. Liked him a lot, fit a lot of things Sean likes in a quarterback. And then, the private workout, where we spent, 3 hours, just meeting with Bo, just getting to know him. Sean can talk about the tests they gave him, and then just watching him throw. And so that was kind of the start, and then get through more tape, and he was just an ideal fit for what we want here.
Yeah, I think, like George said, that because of obviously our need and then the amount, man, there were trip, a lot of those, and all of these players, are at the combine. Some of them do more or less at the combine. Some throw, some don't. But, a lot of private workouts, a lot of their pro days. So you have a body of work to start with. And I would say, man, so many of these guys were impressive. And then you really start focusing in on, all right, you feel like Chicago's got a player. But past that, I think, you can listen to and read, but you're not sure. But I would say that probably early into the process, shortly after these workouts like this, he stood out in a lot of areas, and you pay close attention to all the film study, and obviously he's played a lot of football, but sack differential, turnover differential, accuracy, third down passing, first in this class, first in end of half, first in end of game 2-minute situations, second in red zone. A lot of those other things that, and then let's do another passing statistic and remove a lot of the short underneath throws. And obviously that's part of what they do offensively, and you remove that and you come back with the analytics and it's still first. And so, but I would say his arm strength was, we saw the pro day, but then even in the private workout was very good. And he's super smart. Alex, of course, when you have a former teammate that you just signed a year ago, he's a great resource. And the more you just keep digging into the process and really trying to eliminate the outside noise, relative to, well, you can move back, and none of that's true. You don't know that. And honestly, we felt like the Giants were the joker team in that there were 3 teams at the front that needed quarterbacks, right? We all knew those 3 teams: Chicago, Washington, New England. And then we knew there was the second stretch of Minnesota, Denver, and the Raiders. And so, man, we kept, are the Giants going to take one? Because that then impacted how the last 3 were going to be. And so when they didn't, I think I said to George, I think we think Minnesota likes McCarthy. We don't know this. We think the Raiders like Penix, and we like Nix. Let's get on a conference call with all of them and say, just no one spend any money. We think we know this. And then Atlanta took Penix, and then now all of a sudden, we're paying attention to the team behind us, and it got a little crazy there for a minute. But yeah, the process was long and thorough, And, man, we're excited. We're excited. This was, and look, this is the night, tomorrow's the night where everyone says we got our guy. Yeah, I told George, I said, look, I think we're in a position right where we're at. Shoot, I could fly out there today and be the first one when we're on the clock to knock on his door and make sure he knew that we were the one. And then I thought, that might be a little difficult if something happened. I'd be in Birmingham, Alabama, and all of a sudden we have to divert the plane somewhere. So we stayed put, but we're glad it worked out the way it did.
Sean, you talked about trying to spend as much time as possible with all the quarterbacks through this process. As you got to know Bo a little bit, besides the film, what did you take away from just getting to?
He's extremely smart. We tried to send these guys, a similar test. It was identical. The night before, 5 p.m., email the test. When I say the test, a series of, call it first, second day install, so quite a bit to study. Almost, 5 o'clock when you get 3 days of install and we're meeting at 9 in the morning, it's almost purposely a little bit more than we think. And then at what point do they fail? In other words, it's a lot. And so one part of it, obviously, and a lot, these guys all were really impressive. We got up there 9 a.m. He had the test at 5, and he's sitting there in the office, and you could tell it. He'd probably been in a hotel room, do not disturb, pot of coffee, and just grinding on it. So he's extremely intelligent, real smart. He handled a lot of the protections. I gave you 5 or 6 different statistics. Negative play differential. When you watch him, it's pretty calming. He's very efficient, and it's not just because of you see a ton of NFL throws in their offense. His accuracy set an NC2A record, and then is he making the throws that we're going to ask him to make? And then I think the one thing over the years, if you study it closely, guys that get sacked a lot in college tend to get sacked a lot in the NFL. And sometimes that might be processing. Oftentimes, we'll look at the offensive line and he, the ball comes out, and it comes out sometimes in funny body positions. He's got a quick stroke. But the thing that, like, George and I watched his pro day on video, and the very next day we're there for his private, and we tried to count, all right, how many misses were there? And one of them, it's really amazing to see the location. And so when we have critical factors for certain positions, obviously a quarterback, one of the critical factors is, are they accurate? There has to be receivers, do they catch the ball well? Linebackers, do they? So extremely accurate. And then the other thing I would say is we see TV games during the year. The scouts and George and our personnel people go see games. I was surprised at how big he was. He was a little bit taller than 6'2", close to 220 pounds. I just seen TV games until we started the film process. So those are a few of the things. He's the son of a coach. His father played at Auburn. I'd say kind of a gym rat. He's older, he's married. It's going to be hard for anyone to break 61 games unless there's another pandemic, because, he was able to play 5 years. And I also like the fact that, and there's a few of these quarterbacks that were battle tested, meaning they had some adversity, and a handful of them had, and they all, the makeup of this class was, you go into the process, you root for them all, but you're trying to dig, and you came away from it, and the makeup of these guys were pretty strong.
Troy Rink from the Denver Post. A lot of people had mocked Bo Nix to you because of the fit they saw in your offense, Coach. I guess where do you kind of see that generally? And do you think he would have a chance because of the 61 starts to come in and compete to start right away?
Listen, once we knew this was our target, every time like Chase Daniel got on or Dan Orlovsky or anyone, this is perfect. I'm like, shh, will you be quiet? And you can't control that. Look, I think a lot of times the offense gets built around the player. And so we moved in a direction for years relative to what Drew did, but then when he wasn't starting, or it was Teddy or Jameis, so it wasn't like this guy fits our system, because our system, if, let's just say it was another quarterback, you know, we'd want to move, we want the best player. But yeah, and look, we did our best to talk about other players and directions, and it's difficult sometimes with, you know, you just want, you want to, you don't want everyone to know this is the player, but I saw what you guys saw, and I would cringe, and George would cringe, and we're like, ah, you know, and then, yeah, those are things you can't control.
Because of his experience, would you have a chance, would he come in to compete to start?
Yeah, look, these guys are all going to compete. You know, we just signed, we were real happy to bring Zach on board, you know, and there was no specific timing. That just took a little bit of time. You know, in other words, you know, George and Joe at the Jets, they've been working on that, and so it wasn't like a smoke screen. I know when we signed him, it was closer to the draft, but it could have very well been 3 weeks ago. We knew we wanted to add to the room, and I think I said that much even at the owners' meetings, and we felt we really liked that opportunity. Like, there were a number of veteran backups that signed contracts, and yet we saw talent with a player who just 3 years ago was the number 2 pick in the draft, and we really like his traits. And you know, of course, we have Jared here, Stidham, and Ben, and so, you know, Bill taught me a long time ago, let's let him play, and we got to maximize the reps that we have, and let him develop, and that stuff will sort itself out.
Curious, when a rookie quarterback comes in, what are the biggest things you want him to focus on? Bo was talking about it's time to get to work. What does that work look like when you first get here?
Well, I think it's the same stuff that we want Zach to focus on. I'm talking about Zach, you know, he's coming in, he just got in last week, and it's new, and, you know, get acclimated with your teammates. You know, the off-season program, fortunately, we're, you know, 2 weeks in. You know, our rookie camp will be a couple weeks away, and so, you know, it's that onboarding, if you will, of there's like a number of things, you know, getting to know your teammates, getting to know the offense and the coaching staff and the system, and so there's a process to it, and it begins, you know, it began tonight for him, and then, you know, I think he'll be here tomorrow, and then a couple weeks from now for the off-season program, and so it starts.
I asked this just in historical, because it's historical. Did you have 6 quarterbacks on your board in the top 12 players? And did your board reflect the run on offense?
I'll let George.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go there. We did have 6 quarterbacks in the first round. We liked all these players, and like I said earlier, I mean, we went through this process with all these players, all really, you know, smart, talented, impressive. We're really happy we have Bo. You know, like I said, you know, I think he's a really good fit for what we're doing, and Sean's kind of touched on all that.
I think the one thing we did feel, and I think around the league everyone felt, it's a receiver-heavy draft. There were some talented quarterbacks. If you just do the math, then you thought, all right, you know, who's going to be the first defensive player drafted? But I don't think there was a big surprise around the league that when the first 10, 12, you know, that all you do is just look positionally, and you know, we felt there's some good corners in the draft, but there was a palette when that began. So I think when you have that receiver class with the quarterback class, that it is a little bit historic. I mean, it doesn't happen that often. And then you have the tackles. You know, if you were a team needing a starting tackle and you saw that take place. And so I think that league-wide, not just here, you know, I think we felt like there was going to be more offensive players taken, you know, in the first half of the draft.
Sean, you touched on it a little bit. I think only 10 combined sacks in his 2 seasons at Oregon. what are some of the biggest things he does in terms of setting the protections?
Well, I
does he
think
so few?
it's a great question. I think that process varies. You know, sometimes teams do it with the center, sometimes teams do it with the quarterback. Then whoever does it to begin with at the line, that oftentimes you have to change, into your cadence. If the threat is somewhere else, you've got to change where you're bringing your protection. He does that pretty quickly. He processes fast. So I think sack reduction sometimes is the ability to process and deliver. And so I think that's oftentimes hard for us to measure. But he is someone that can multitask. You see it on film. And I think that, in talking with Alex even, you try to hit every base and make sure, like, the information you feel that you're seeing is correct. And Alex, went on, like, look, he was in the offensive line room, handling the protections, talking about what we're going to do with these looks. So I think that it's that whole sum total of, and then it's also the ability to say, this is where I want to go within the framework of this pass. And sure, some of those quick screens, but we cut those out. Like, we just looked at those as, like, he was asked to do it and he did it, and evaluated the intermediate to down the field, and really try to evaluate third down, red zone. How's he doing with the game on the line? And he's playing Oregon first time, early in the year, and he needs a drive here in the fourth quarter. You know what? And they get down in field goal range and they miss a field goal. He excelled in those areas, and time again. And so I think some of that's processing.
Sean, you've had a lot of success with quarterbacks who've had experience in the league, and now you have both of your first round pick coming in raw. So how does kind of the process of teaching and developing change a little bit when you have this kind of blank slate of a quarterback coming in to learn?
Yeah, good question. I can reference just, a few different places. In New York, when we got Kerry Collins, he'd been experienced, and yet he was new to our system. And we had to, what are the things he does well? Too often we can talk about what they don't, and so we really build around his strengths. And then, in Dallas, Quincy Carter, we signed Tony Romo, we had Bledsoe, we had a number of different players, and we try to build around their strengths. Younger players, Drew was, I think, 4 years in. We were drafts, if you go back in that 06, my first year there, we were evaluating Cutler and Young and Leinart and all of those guys. We had the second pick of the draft, and it wasn't until we were at the combine that the news with Drew's release came. And then even with that, you had to deal with an injury. And so I think the first step with all of these guys, Jared, and any of our guys, Zach, Ben, what do they do well? And there'll be a handful of things all of these guys have in common they do well. And then, even in a preseason game, when one of them's in, you try to build your script around. You want to see them have success. That's our job, I think, as coaches and teachers. So, this is the first time I've been involved or part of a group, part of a team that drafted a quarterback in the first round. We've tried to do it before, and it's exciting. The challenge is exciting, but it's still, all right, you want good quarterback play, and the two biggest allies to that, I believe strongly, are good defensive play and a running game. In other words, if you're a quarterback and you're having trouble running the ball, let's get worse. If you're a quarterback and you're having trouble running the ball and stopping people, your job description becomes very difficult. But when you're playing good defense and you have a running game, your job description is a little bit more palatable. And so for all these guys, I feel like they're all young relative to, Jared's been in the league quite a while. He started some games. Ben has actually started some games and been in the league and in another league. But they're all young players. And then Zach obviously has played quite a bit as a young player. But I think that it's the process of the fundamentals of, and You don't assume anything. You start with a proper huddle and cadence. I think, look, the other element is more and more we're seeing these guys in shotgun offenses. And so, we'll be flexible that way. And that was the case really with Russ. And, Drew was a little bit more under center than later in his career. We began to evolve to more shotgun. So I think it's still about trying to find the things that they do well. And I think most importantly, and we talk about it all the time, is what's the vision? And so the scouts scout the player, they read, coaches look at the player, all of us, the front office, what's the vision, how do we, and it's important that that's articulated and to increase your chance of success.
A question for both of you guys. How active were you looking to potentially move up? And then on the other side of the coin, how risky would it have been when Nix was there at 12 to try to still get him and trade down and get some potential additional assets?
We took calls from teams ahead of us. Never really got too serious. We considered moving back, but once Penix went, it got a little, stressful there at the end. You had the Raiders behind us. And so, we just didn't want to overthink it. This was our guy. We're going to take our guy. But we did think about it, not too far. There was a few, we could have moved a couple picks back and maybe got some picks, but at the end of the day, this was our guy. Let's just take him. Let's not overthink it. And we would have been sick, if we lost him just for a couple fifth-round picks or what have you.
I was actively involved in trying to pretend we were moving forward. In other words, it's this time of the year, and it's difficult, and we want to keep our options open. And I would say this for a normal position, and we talked about it, we're entering the draft. You might have needs at rush, edge, tackle, receiver. Then you're really managed. But when it comes to something this specific relative to the quarterback, it's man, you just don't want others to know that this is their focal point. And I think that oftentimes, and look, I get it, but oftentimes you hear this, well, if they don't get one here, they can go back and get this one. And I think that, I think that's, I heard those same comments, when the Chiefs selected Patrick, and you go back and tune in to everything that was said, well, they could have got him later, and no, they couldn't have. No, they couldn't have. And so let's not worry about, and when we all understand managing the draft, but let's also, let's worry about what it's going to look like 3 years from now. And that's 3 to 4 years from now when this class will be judged. And make sure we get the right guy there. But I agree 100%. We did, we were talking about a couple moves, and then, when Atlanta took that guy, now it was like, holy cow. Like, do we have to go up a pick?
And then Minnesota jumped. We're like, oh boy, okay.
Yeah, and so we're paying attention to where the Raiders are, and look, it was a tough 10 minutes or 20 minutes just because now New York was the team. That was the team. If New York took a quarterback, we knew then the three at the front took theirs. New York would have been the surprise team, and there's 3 waiting for 2. And so once New York cleared, I'm sure every team we're talking about felt like, all right. And then Atlanta taking the quarterback, and that's the fun part about this draft. You can't dive into everyone's draft room to know how they feel about someone. So.
Sean Edwarder, ESPN. You mentioned it a minute ago, in all the ways that Bo Nix seems so compatible with your offense. The one where it doesn't seem like a great fit is you use your quarterbacks under center at one of the highest rates in the league traditionally, and he has very little experience doing that. How difficult a transition is that for a player?
I think it's the transition for the coach. He's been under center, and look, we're not going to the moon and back to step under center. But what I said earlier is, and I think the same way with Zach when he played at BYU and really Stiddy, And now Jared is that experience under center because he's been at New England and in Las Vegas, and will play under center. But it gets back to, developing around what his strengths are, and so look, the job is to pay attention to that and move in those directions, and we'll adjust. But they'll all look. These guys will all take snaps under center. You see it at the Senior Bowl. They do it at their pro day with the workouts. I think they'll be fine. And look, he's got specifically, and I'm just talking about Bo, his warm fuzzy blanket is the center that played with him a year ago, so that'll be nice.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you, guys.
All good?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.